was fun. I love this sport. I gave it my all. It's fucking crazy. I had a blast, and thank you to all the fans and everyone.
Folks, it's over. Joshua knocks out Jake Paul in the 6th round on Netflix.
That would align with a ring that size, a negative style, as we mentioned. It really comes down to the fan interest. Jake Paul is on a 2-fight stretch coming into this one, which really put his reputation on the line.
Boxing professionals are reacting after Jake Paul's shocking knockout loss to Anthony Joshua. Following the defeat, Jake hinted that once he completes his goals in boxing, he may retire and try a career in the NFL. This would be a major change in his sports journey.
Like legitimately just to play like safety and just deck people. No, I swear to God, I'm about to bring hella ratings to whatever team I'm on.
Where would you want to go if you can go to any team?
Shit, the Browns.
So
I can run a 4.34.
He's the fastest man on the planet.
I got hands. I have the size, the power. I can knock people out with one punch. So why can't I play free safety?
Do you think you coming into the NFL would be the equivalent of like when an NFL player says, I'm going to try to box now?
No, because I played football my whole life. At the end of the day, it's coverage, knowing your plays, and then just being fast.
The boxing world had strong reactions after the fight. Ex-user IB shared a blunt opinion, posting, "Jake Paul knocked out. His career is over. This bum is done." Former boxer Duke McKenzie also spoke about the matchup. He said Jake Paul looked far too small compared to Anthony Joshua. Even when Jake tried to throw punches, he couldn't reach AJ properly. McKenzie called it a clear mismatch and warned that continuing these kinds of fights could be dangerous and damaging to Jake's boxing reputation.
Paul tried to throw a shot, he would lunge in, jump in, and because he was so short, he'd miss. And then he ended up stumbling over his feet and falling over. Sometimes in that fight, he reminded me of, have you seen that Kung Fu film called The Drunken Master? Except for he wasn't a master. There's a Kung Fu guy who walks around and normally kicks people's ass. And he looks drunk all the time. That's what that fight reminded me of. It was such a poor showing from Jake Paul. You know, I mean, it's a well-documented fact. There was a lot of money on the line. And I'm sure you, Max, as I would, and anybody else in the street would fight Anthony Joshua for 75 million. You just would. And the same thing would happen. And even after the fight, now the fight's over, it's 75 million.
Another ex-user, Chelsea, reacted emotionally to Jake Paul's loss, posting, "I hardly come here anymore, but I'm really glad Jake Paul lost. Maybe now he'll shut up." A former UFC champion Michael Bisping also shared his thoughts. He described Joshua's performance as a masterclass. Bisping explained that AJ's powerful uppercuts and combinations badly hurt Jake. Even when Jake tried to run and avoid the punches, he couldn't escape the damage. Bisping said Jake suffered serious facial injuries and must rest and recover fully before thinking about fighting again. The fight clearly exposed Jake's limits against top-level fighters.
In my humble opinion, because I'm a big Anthony Joshua fan. Of course, I've been a supporter for the longest time. A rather lackluster, unmotivated Anthony Joshua that didn't look like he was being particularly nasty, right? Yeah, a lot of the time he was out of range, and okay, it is hard to land a shot on someone that's backing up and moving away the whole time. And there was a lot of times where he had him in the corner and he could have thrown a shot. And sometimes he was telegraphing his shots. And anytime he did go in to throw a punch, as I said before, Jake Paul would shoot in and turn it into a wrestling match. And even when he wasn't shooting in, he was clinching a lot. This is boxing. It's not MMA, as we know. The referee should have done a much better job of getting in there and separating them much, much faster. Next round, I think it was the 4th round, he got dropped twice. In the 5th round, he got through it. In the 6th round, caught him with the jab, then a glancing right hook. He goes down, and that was that. That was all she wrote, right? I did a live. There was about 9,000 people watching at one point. Nobody was particularly enjoying the matchup. Listen, okay? I respect both men. I respect anyone really that steps into the ring, okay? And certainly going up against Anthony Joshua, that was a tall task, okay? You know, metaphorically and figuratively, right? It was a tall task. It was a big job. It was a tough opponent. It was a mismatch, and it was, right? Jake Paul never worried Anthony Joshua once. He never rung his bell. He never caused any damage. He never had him worried. He never did anything. It wasn't a fight. It was a display of how long can Jake Paul last? Can he run away long enough?
Ex-user Cabaral's Finest reacted to Jake Paul's injury, posting Jake Paul has gone to the hospital with a suspected broken jaw. Bro was forced into early retirement. Sean Jones also shared his reaction, saying at least the fight was real and not scripted. He noted that even though Jake's jaw was broken, Anthony Joshua didn't use his full power. Jones said the injury shows how tough it is to step into the ring with a world-class boxer like Joshua and highlights the serious risks Jake faced.
For those people who were fully convinced that this fight was 100% rigged, like people said that this is a clown show, and they said this is rigged, this is scripted. Okay, so now Joshua's won. What are you going to say to that? So was it scripted that Joshua was going to win? You see this whole narrative about, oh, the fight's rigged, the fight's scripted. That's illegal to do, and Joshua is not going to tarnish his legacy by doing something like that. Would Jake Paul do something like that? Maybe so, yeah, but not someone like Joshua. Come on. Now, to be fair, 80% of that fight was looking a little bit dodgy. It was looking like Joshua wasn't throwing as much as he usually would. Jake Paul was landing on Joshua. He landed a really strong jab that knocked Joshua's head back. He landed a couple of decent overhand rights. In fact, Jake was kind of the first one who landed the biggest shots of the fight. But this is the thing, anyone who fights, even on like a low-level basis, or who just does some sparring will understand that when you fight someone who has got nowhere near the skill level as you, sometimes it can be a little bit harder because they're awkward. They're doing stuff that you don't really expect. You know, sometimes when you fight beginners, it's a bloody nightmare. Just like, you know, awkward movements. You're like, what are they throwing? You don't expect certain shots to come that do come. And then you fight someone who's a little bit more traditionally sound with the fundamentals, and it's almost a little bit easier. And I think that's what we've seen here in this fight. AJ has had an easier time with some fighters who've got like 40 professional fights with 20 KOs on the record than he did with Jake Paul. Why is that? Oh, because it's scripted. It's scripted. No, it's not scripted. It's just because Jake Paul is awkward and he's a beginner in relation to Joshua. So Joshua just took some time to figure them out. You could see Joshua was getting a little bit frustrated in that 4th and 5th round.
Usermere71 sent a strong message to Jake Paul after the loss, posting, "Do everyone a favor and don't return." A boxing analyst Liam Goff warned that Jake Paul is now in serious trouble. He said Jake's boxing career is effectively on hold due to severe injuries, including a broken jaw. Goff stressed that Jake needs a long recovery period and must focus on healing. Until he fully recovers, any plans to continue fighting are off the table. This moment is critical for Jake's long-term health and future in professional sports.
At that face-off with Tank Davis, he was looking at a guy who was, 5-6 inches shorter than him and probably 60-70 pounds lighter, right? So he was probably looking at that thinking, yeah, you're a legit boxer, yeah, you hit very hard, but look how much bigger I am to you. Contrast that to him looking up at Anthony Joshua and realizing, oh my God, look at the size of you in comparison to me. That's a bit different. And I think with Jake Paul, it really dawned on him what's going on. But Jake Paul has to keep face. He has to stay essentially in that persona that, you know, I am the man, I'm going to win this, trying to sell a dream to a casual, a bit like what Eddie Hearn does, trying to sell the casual audience that this is going to be a real fight, quote unquote. It was a real fight. It's not scripted, but you know what I mean, that he's really in this fight. That's what he was trying to do. And he did that well up until fight night. Boy, did he fail miserably on fight night. Again, I give him credit. He doesn't need to box. He can choose an easier profession, as I say. But to go in and to run around the ring like that, that was something else entirely. I mean, he was doing his best Roadrunner impression in there. He was running around that ring from the minute that bell went. That was all he was trying to do. And listen, AJ's performance, I can critique it from a defensive point of view, that he got hit with some silly shots that he probably shouldn't have been hit with. He was trying to cut the ring off in a ring as big as that. It's not easy. All right. And furthermore, if you're in there with an opponent who purely just wants to survive, he's no interest in winning the fight. He just wants to go the rounds. People, you could be one of the most you could be a prime Mike Tyson, Bone Crusher Smith, prime example. People never talk about that fight with Mike Tyson because they say, oh.
After the fight, Jake Paul updated fans on X about his recovery. He thanked his medical team and shared details about his condition, saying just got out of surgery. Everything went smoothly. Thanks for all the love. Lots of pain and stiffness. I have to eat liquids for 7 days. Big thanks to the amazing team at Miami University Hospital. Wade also commented on the fight, saying Jake may have felt he had nothing left to prove. Since Jake doesn't need to defend multiple titles, he can focus on big money fights. Wade mentioned possible matchups with stars like Canelo and even a future fight with Tyson Fury if Jake fully commits. However, he admitted Jake was nowhere near AJ's level in size, power, speed, skill, or endurance. Still, he respected Jake for stepping into the ring and called the event a great spectacle for boxing fans.
In terms of what he's doing in the boxing ring.
Listen, so long as people will tune in and so long as Jake Paul is paid by Netflix or any broadcaster to air his fights, we're going to see this continue. And Jake Paul knows his business model, right? Now, this deviated, this AJ fight, which came together kind of last minute after the Tank Davis fight fell apart. But we know Jake Paul's MO here. It's find the most popular guy with the most physical disadvantages for me to fight. And Jake Paul has the benefit that he's turned himself into a villain, or in the pro wrestling circles, a heel. People tune in to watch. We did not tune into this fight to see competitive boxing. Most of us tuned in because we thought, here's Anthony Joshua. Here's a 2-time unified heavyweight champion, a guy who physically just overwhelms Jake Paul. And we're finally going to get what Tyron Woodley and Anderson Silva, Nate Diaz were not physically fit, whether it be through their size, experience, or age to do, and that is knock out Jake Paul. And so, because I don't really feel like we got that satisfying comeuppance that a lot of people have been waiting for, it kind of gives Jake Paul a little bit of mystique, I'd almost say, to still try and string this along. Now, I don't know in terms, he says he wants to be cruiserweight champion. I'm not quite sure what the competitive road there is, because let's make no mistake, the reason this fight lasted as long as it did is because Jake Paul focused exclusively on being elusive. He did his best, and kudos to him, right? He did a great job of not getting cornered. He was always on the gas until the gas sort of fell out from underneath him. And so I don't quite know, short of leveraging his popularity, how he's going to get to that title shot if he's not actually going to fight, like really fight an elite boxer. But if he's looking to make money, there's the KSI fight out there. There's the Tommy Fury rematch. There is ways for Jake Paul